the president of the Federation of Independent Trade Unions, FITUN, and the president of the Communication Workers Union, CWU, Joseph Remy, is my guest. A very good morning to you, sir. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Rennie, and good morning to your listeners and to your web viewers. It's a pleasure joining this very privileged program this morning.
It is always very good to have you with us. I know that you tried to get out this morning, but I know how time works sometimes. Finance Minister Comimbut made the 000 offer to the public sector. At that time when he did, you called for an apology and his removal from the National Tripartite Advisory Council. The minister has since apologized. Then after he has explained that the 000 utterance was a starting offer. Was that not enough to lay the issue to rest for you? Because I see you were still calling for more actions, which was part of your original thing, is that he should be removed from that National Tripartite Advisory Council.
Okay, and at this time, we still don't believe that that is enough to warrant us to change our position. Because, you see, that tripartite process is a very serious and a very important and critical process for any country, consistent with what would have been ILO, International Labour Organization standards and dictates, and the whole issue of trying to bring about a different kind of society. And I could remember when that process was initiated by this current government, there was a lot of pomp and fanfare, and the Prime Minister in an address pointed to the critical role that the NTAC is supposed to play. Let me say NTAC is the same National Tripartite Advisory Council. The critical role that NTAC is supposed to play, particularly now on the basis of the economic challenges, and that the partners will sit together and come up with strategies and policies and thereafter advise the government. We could only advise because at the end of the day it's the government to take them and implement them. But we have not really gotten into those kind of discourses yet. And the Minister of Finance, to us, has breached a fundamental issue of trust in that tripartite process. And you see, trust is something that, when it is breached, it is a difficult thing to regain if certain things are not done properly.
But there are many who say he was unreservedly contrite, and as such, and specifically in the area of raising gas prices 3 times without any riots. That statement that I know stuck in the craw of your organization. You don't think that one can have what is called sometimes a dynamic utterance and want to correct it after?
And all I'm saying is that in my latest release and on the behalf of FITUN, we said we would still maintain our position, and we have to re-engage at NTAC, and we have to be assured on the basis of certain things we believe when we engage in those discussions, whether we will change our position relative to the call for the minister to be removed. At this time, the apology is only one step, and I think our re-engagement at NTAC and certain assurances, maybe we have to determine how do we get those assurances laid out, and certain protocols that must be developed and observed through the NTAC. Once we are satisfied, those protocols take care of any future utterances and develop consequences. Then we would not feel satisfied until those things are put in place, because we could find ourselves back to a similar situation. The minister may make a statement, he has a pension for making those ridiculous statements.
And
then he could come back and apologize again.
The president of the Federation of Independent Trade Unions, FITUN, and president of the CWU, Joseph Remy, is my guest this morning. We discussed with the Minister of Finance and what he said. Now, you just repeated what caught my attention. You said he has a penchant in making ill-advised and ill-founded statements that has endangered the spirit of trust relative to the tripartite process. I am not aware of any utterance that has at least galvanized the public in condemnation as this one, such a public outcry. Let me put it that way. What other instances we have on that?
Mr. Imbert is not new to politics in Trinidad and Tobago, Rennie. We are all fully aware of Mr. Imbert's history and his arrogance that he displays while he occupied government office. Mr. Imbert was a minister before that plenty of people have problems with in terms of how we dealt with them. And I could recall when he was appointed to the office of Minister of Finance, we initially raised some concerns. While we heard the Prime Minister say he was the most experienced of his ministers and of his parliamentarians.
And he is.
He is, right? So while we put that on the scale, we have to balance that with the sensitivity of the position of Minister of Finance, particularly now where the country has to undergo some serious re-engineering, if you want to put it in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And as such, the Minister of Finance sits at a pivotal position in that whole re-engineering process. And his demeanor and his attitude must be conducive to building confidence among the partners, the tripartite partners in this process. And that is why I'm saying is that our history with the minister suggests that he has that penchant for doing those things. It's not the first time. And all we are saying now is that he has unreservedly apologized. It's the first time with him do anything as such.
Mm-hmm.
So, giving him the benefit of the doubt, we would now want to re-engage at the NTAC and develop those protocols so that we would be satisfied that there will be certain behavioral patterns, code of conduct, and all those things around the tripartite process, understanding the role of each partners and the shareholding structure that exists within the partners, that whole relationship. And once those things are established, we will give consideration to how we move forward. But in the absence of that, we are saying we would have to continue with our position because the process, the trust in the process would have been dealt a severe blow, you know.
But the removal of the finance minister from the National Tripartite Advisory Council, while you're waiting to see the proof of the pudding is in the eating, is what you're saying. While you're waiting for that proof to come your way, I think that proof can only manifest itself by representation, by being present in such a forum as the Advisory Council, and interaction, which is what can be used to rebuild that lost trust and confidence, as you said.
And that's what I'm saying, Rennie. When we re-engage the NTAC, we will engage in those discussions. And if we don't see anything evolve in a particular way, then we will maintain our position. At this time, we can't just say we withdraw the position to come back and say we hold it. That is not how we do things, you know. You understand what I'm saying?
Understand.
So we will hold to our position, engage in discussions, and if the discussions give us some level of comfort and satisfaction that there is a framework that will allow us to move forward with the intent to rebuild the trust, then we will give the opportunity and we will move forward. In the absence of that, we have to hold our positions now until we see something different evolve.
Guest is Joseph Remy. Good to have you here. We're talking about the Tripartite Advisory Council. Let me move away from the minister now and just ask the effectiveness of these discussions. How effective? Because there are those who have questioned and said before, we have had this before. It has not taken us very far. Tell us this morning, how effective have these tripartite discussions been?
Well, to be honest, Rennie, I don't think it has really got down into any serious policy discussions and development yet. And that is a major concern to the trade union movement. The most in-depth, to me, submission that was made to the tripartite council would have been done by the labor movement. Because the labor movement sat down. We were very mindful of the state of the nation. And what we did when we were appointed to the tripartite process, we sat with our advisors and we came up with a labor alternative economic action plan. We call it LEAP, L-E-A-P, Labor's Economic Alternative Plan. And we presented it to NTAC, and it is an all-encompassing package that we believe could generate, put some stimulus in the economy, while at the same time dealing with some of the hemorrhaging and the wastage that is taking place and all those things. And we have not really gotten into a deep discussion around LEAP and any alternatives thereafter. Yes, the other partners would have also put some issues on the table relative to the budget. But I think that is as far as we have gotten. And I'm concerned about the pace at which NTAC is operating at and the effectiveness of NTAC. And if I could remind the nation, in the last dispensation when we had the Social Dialogue Task Force, the same thing, but they call it differently. Under the People's Partnership, they call it the Social Dialogue Task Force. FITUN had to remove itself from the process because of the same issue. We were engaging in meetings, and when you go to a meeting, the chairman is not there, somebody doesn't come, you don't have a quorum, and that ran for about 2 or 3 years. And we said, look, we don't want to be part of a cosmetic process. This is serious business. It's about the country, and if nobody is serious about tripartism, let us extricate ourselves. And we did that. And again, we have re-engaged because we understand the importance, and we subscribe to some of the ILO conventions that talk to the value of tripartism. And as such, we will re-engage, but we are concerned that the process is not given the significance it's supposed to be given. And I think that based on the government scheduling and the ministers' challenges that they have with their respective portfolios, it places a challenge on the process. So maybe there has to be a relook of the structure of NTAC and how do you have ministers engaged without it impacting negatively on the schedule. Maybe inside of the minister's portfolio, where the responsibility for tripartism takes place, that should be written into their job
description
or issue, so that they will know that that is now part of their function and is not an attachment to a minister's work, and as such it takes a priority down the line. This should be top priority now, and I think that is one of the re-engineering things that we need to look at.
The president of FITUN, Federation of Independent Trade Unions, and the CWU, Communication Workers Union, Joseph Remy, is my guest this morning, and we're looking at our state of labor here in Trinidad and Tobago. But I guess we also must look at the state of labor across the region and across the world. The president of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, President David Granger, said last week the trade union movement in Guyana, like that in the Caribbean, need to develop a new model of trade unionism so that they can remain relevant in the changing labor market and economics of the region. There are many others who additionally feel that way. While they say there is a good case for improved conditions for wages for workers, unions in general seem to be deaf or apathetic to the 2/3 drop in the country's revenue, that is Trinidad and Tobago, and the need to be more restrained in their demands, including full and immediate payments of past commitments. Is this a fair or unfair assessment?
Well, it's an unfair assessment, Rennie, and I think that he may have been speaking to the Guyana experience. And let me just say, ironically, the reason why I didn't really see this is because of our convention that is taking place now. And you know what is the theme of our convention? Our nation in crisis.
Good, because
the trade union movement's intervention as a social partner to rescue our nation. You hear the important part, as a social partner.
Yes.
And we had a FITUN address done by renowned Professor Rhoda Reddock. And one of the fundamental pillars around which we were focusing on is how do we re-engage at the social level. We are mindful of the changing environment that we are operating in. And the main impetus we came out of our discuss on Friday night was the issue of re-engagement at the social structure level to build back that social stock in Trinidad and Tobago, because we realized that social wage and all the other attendant social benefits are very relevant and critical going forward.
Mr. President,
the Communication Workers Union is ahead of the game.
Let me just make this clear. The Guyana president was not averse to the participation of unions. He was merely commenting that when you look at the drop in membership, you look at the changing fortunes of many countries, that unions have to do things differently. He said the hammer and the sickle must be put aside. The advocacy-driven only give has to change. So it was an overall commentary as against being against union, because Guyana, as you know, in the forefront of dealing with the issues of workers, in the region.
And that's what I'm saying, Rennie. For the last 2 years, we have shifted our focus in terms of community outreach, and now we are talking about the social benefits and the social issues. Because what we understand is that if we don't re-engage, and we have started at the primary school level, if we don't re-engage and re-educate people about the values of the trade union movement, and the contribution it would have made to the development of our society, they would not appreciate the value, the importance of it, and then be aligned to it. So we have taken a conscious decision to also focus on that area. And I'm saying there may be merit in the minister's statement or the president's statement relative to Guyana, and maybe some instances in Trinidad. But we have also analyzed the thing and realized that as a movement, we also have to relook our approach and our strategies and our tactics and adjust to the times, but never ever deviating from the fundamental principle and the reason for the existence of a trade union. Because, on the flip side of that, corporations keep changing their structure and business keep changing their structure, but the reason for their existence remain the same.
Profits.
That's right.
That's right. It is 25.
So we also have to make sure that we hold to our fundamental principles, but adjust our approach to be more attractive to the wider community, because they and all have been subjected to an education system and program that has taken them in all different directions, and the history does not teach them about the value of trade union, and maybe not only trade unions, but credit unions and cooperativism, that whole issue of communities working together. to build a better country. The whole issue of materialism and individualism has been pushed through our system, and that is where we have that whole the moral fabric has broken down, and we are seeing the greed that has now taken over society. We have to redirect that energy and put it back into context of building. I always use Christ as the example, Rennie.
Mm-hmm.
Christ never did it alone. His corporate structure was him and 12 disciples there.
Yes. At the end of the day, there's something that I got your point. At the end of the day, it's what we've been advocating for a long time. The corporate citizen must understand that it is a citizen, and it's only going to benefit from what the nation collectively provides for it, which is an educated workforce and so on.
All of us together has to do this thing,
In your convention that's taking place right now, how front of the burner is this discussion that 14% is as high as the ministry would be allowed to go, one, and two, the issue of wage restraint?
And Rennie, let me just say, one of the things we try to avoid is what the minister has done, has set parameters between 0 and 14. And I think it was a little premature. We have discussed it, and what we said we will subscribe to is the principle and the process of free and fair collective bargaining. Now, you represent workers from all different sectors. So you have to take each sector on its own and make a determination as to the extent of increase you would look for on the basis of a lot of different factors. So that one-size-fits-all approach that the minister has articulated may not be appropriate for some industries. And that is why we are saying the free and fair collective bargaining process, we have recommitted ourselves to that process, and we will take each negotiation as it comes. People will put their positions on the table. We will look at it, and then on the basis of all the different circumstances, ability to pay, impact on the society, impact on the economy, and all the other things that are attendant in a collective bargaining process, we will arrive at a wage settlement. And I think most of the companies we negotiate with understands the communication workers unions approach in terms of doing collective bargaining, and that is the approach we always attempt to take in those circumstances. We don't put top and bottom parameters in a vacuum. We put it on the context of how organizations are structured and what each one presents to the table.
My guest inside Brunch is Joseph Remy. Joseph, I want to take you back to March this year, and I wanted to go into another area that deals with the whole question of accountability, corruption, and cutting waste and so on. Back in March this year, as president of the CWU, you announced a campaign to save the state-owned telecommunications services of Trinidad and Tobago over what was claimed as attempts to sabotage the company. Have satisfactory corrective measures been taken, and what is your union's position on the company's viability in an increasingly competitive market?
And that question, Rennie, is very valid, and it has about 2 or 3 dimensions to it. One is the whole issue of the shareholding structure, right? And one of the major issues we have, there is a timeline that the Telecommunication Authority has given to Cable and Wireless to dispose of their 49% shareholding in TSTT. And that is on the basis of the conflict of interest that would have developed when Cable and Wireless owned Columbus, which is Flow, and there was a direct competitive issue there, right? So that is one part of it. So the issue is who is going to be that 49% partner for TSTT going forward. That is one issue. And on the other hand, we have from the local end the competence at certain levels of executive management of the company and the inability to put persons on the board who has telecommunication expertise and experience. And we have challenged that. We still have some executive managers that we believe should go. Right now we have a major issue of corruption in the fleet department that has now evolved, where the company has bought 12 bucket trucks to service the customers, and none can move because they have not done it to specifications because somebody tried to manipulate the process. That will evolve, and those are the things that we have talked about. And what we are saying is that those persons who are responsible for those things must be extricated from the company. TSTT is very viable. It has the ability to be one of the most sustainable local entities, but it must have the right governance structure and the right governance personnel in place, and it must have the right executive management personnel in place. And we must now put a governance model that deals with the issue of corruption and consequences with some immediate effect. It's easy to take action against employees in the bargaining unit, but when executive managers do their thing, it's a long, drawn-out process and you don't hear anything, and they leave with a golden handshake. We have a real issue with that, and those are the things that we are battling. But we have reached a point where we believe that we are now seeing some action being taken because of the union's agitation about having those persons removed and deal with the corruption that has bedeviled the company's ability to realize its true potential as one of the most viable entities in the Caribbean.
Joseph Remy, president of the Federation of Independent Trade Unions and the Communication Workers Union. As I said, you have your convention going on. I thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this morning, and thank you for your input.
Thanks very much, Rennie, and it's a pleasure. And, let me apologize for not being able to make it at the appropriate time. I hope that we could atone for that in the future.
And we will. I will be holding you to task on that.
Yeah, definitely. I will live up to that next time around.
I thank you, sir. Thank you so much for taking the time. Have yourself a wonderful day and a good week.
Take care.
Thank you so much.